Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness, adapted by mangaka Gou Tanabe. This was adapted in 2016 to 2017. Dark Horse Manga brought it to America and translated it in 2019. I have to mention, this video is brought to you due to a generous endowment, once again, from the Archibald Gernsback Institute of Sequential Art Studies and the Chubb Group Life Insurance Companies. So, once again, thank you, Archibald Gernsback. This is a very generous endowment. And so I've never read Tanabe before. I've never seen his work, but he's really good. And he really captures the creepiness of H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness. It's a very tiny book, if you can see by my hand here. A little tiny, fat little graphic novel. This is part 1 of 2. The next video, we'll look at number 2. And I read this book, H.P. Lovecraft's book, when I was a teenager in high school. I was into Stephen King a lot. This English teacher, he knew that, and he loaned me his copy of H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness. And, you know, it was so different than Stephen King. It's so slow. And at first I was just like, I don't think I like this. It's kind of slow. But I totally got into the fact that, man, it is slow. And just, man, how the tension builds. It is just this sense of dread that just grows and grows so slowly. And it was really powerful. I barely remember the plot or anything. I just remember being like, I've never read anything like this before. And this manga adaptation kind of captures that. You know, it's a very, slow creeping dread going on here. Let's crack this open. I don't even know if you can see the cover very well. It's like the silver ink. Oh, that's nice. More silver ink. Title page. We got this some beautiful color plates. Here's a quote from Edgar Allan Poe. Here's an excerpt. Not a quote, a little excerpt from the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket by Edgar Allan Poe. And a little kind of tiny introduction here. And apparently H.P. Lovecraft was very inspired by Edgar Allan Poe. This is the only long-form thing H.P. Lovecraft ever wrote. But it is firmly entrenched in his whole cosmic horror Cthulhu mythos. And we get one more page of color. And another little thing about At the Mountains of Madness. Here's the credits. And the contents pages. And we start off in 1931. We see this expedition from the Miskatonic University. And they're in Antarctica because the last expedition they sent disappeared. They stopped contacting them, the university. It was a team under Professor Lake. So Professor Lake's whole crew is missing. So this expedition is going up there to see what happened and hopefully rescue them if they're in trouble. And they come upon the ruins of the camp. I love this creepy drawing of this upright dead body. Very horrifying. Much more detailed than most manga. Look at this, just the line work here. Really puts in a lot of detail. Very illustrative. So they keep coming, they find all the whole crew is dead. And it looks like they've been eviscerated. They've been skinned as if some kind of inhuman butcher took care of them. Even the dogs are all killed. And the destruction of the campsite, it doesn't just look like a storm hit it. It's beyond that. So they have no idea what happened. But then in the distance, they see something even stranger. They see this in the middle of Antarctica where, there's no human life. This weird star-shaped kind of mound. And they look up and they see a mountain range so titanic, like nothing on Earth, previously unknown. And it's dark and sinister, filled with fear. There it is. This guy's so good at drawing this just creepy Lovecraftian stuff. Where, like, this is just a drawing of a mountain range, right? But it looks like fucking hell. Like, it looks very scary. It's not just your average mountain range. It looks like no good can come from that mountain range. Then we pull back, and now we have the title. So that's just the introduction. Now we start with chapter 1. We have a little quote from Captain James Cook talking about how Antarctica is just this wasteland, something inexplicably hard about the land, and basically advises future travelers to just avoid it entirely. It's not worth exploring. It's just a bad place all around. So now we flash back, and we see this first expedition that got killed. This is their story of going to Antarctica. Oh, I'm sorry. Before that, we have a little history of the exploration of Antarctica. A little kind of synopsis. And now it's September 1930. And we see this guy, Professor Dyer. He's from Miskatonic University. His assistant, Danforth. And they're to meet the other heads of the expedition at the dock. The ship's all ready to go. All that remains is to introduce themselves to their colleagues, and then they're going to head off. So, we're introduced to Pabodi, the guy with glasses. He's the engineer of the group. Professor Lake, the youngish-looking guy here, he's the biologist. And Professor Lake has an assistant named Gedney. These are our main protagonists. Of course, there's other support crew. There's pilots and stuff. So they've got airplanes. They've got the best modern technology. And they're going to try to prove a hypothesis that the main scientific reason for this expedition, that supposedly once Antarctica was a verdant, maybe even tropical land. It wasn't always a frozen waste. So they're going to do geological core samples and to try to prove it. They have an uneventful passage to Antarctica. And it's really interesting. I don't know if this is a real thing, but apparently there's these mirages in Antarctica where it's almost like the land is reflected in the sky. So it's like a mirror image, almost like you can see upside down mountains coming out of the sky. I would love to see that if that's true. That sounds amazing. So we're already introduced to like the otherness of Antarctica. It's like another planet. It's almost like not even part of the normal Earth. It's just so different. And they get in their boats and they're ready to land. They build a base camp. And they assemble their airplanes. And they plan their expedition. Yeah, it's a really slow build-up. Like, barely, you see nothing weird for like 100 pages. It's just these guys. But there is this growing sense of, dread and like, something's not right here. But everything seems to be going well. It's summertime in Antarctica, or almost summertime. So it's pretty mild weather. And everything's going great. So they're scouting around in their airplanes. Checking out the sights. I like these double page spreads which really convey just like the vastness of Antarctica. I know a guy who got to go to Antarctica. He just said it really is just, you can't even describe it, how awe-inspiring it is. So they start drilling. They're using dynamite, trying to dredge up geological strata. Basically, they're looking into the past. They're looking into millions of years ago. What made up the samples, the soil, the rock samples of that era. And they find something remarkable. This piece of like shale, it has this striped pattern on it. I'm sorry, it's a slate. And the biologist, Lake, he says, are you sure it's a fossil? That ripple pattern is reasonably common in sedimentary rocks. And he says, oh, I'm sorry, the geologist says that. Dyer. But then Lake, the biologist, says, no, you guys are mistaken. That pattern is organic. It's an organism of considerably advanced evolution, and it doesn't fit any classification I know. And now, this is like in a strata of rock where there was barely any single-cell organisms. It shouldn't exist there. There should be no even slightly advanced life forms. Man, look at his illustrative skills, just like drawing little tools here. Look how well drawn everything is and the shading. So Lake starts to get obsessed. Well, he's just very intrigued. I mean, this is the find of the century. The fact that there's these complex organic things where they shouldn't be. So he's like, we got to find more. They see another one of those amazing mirages. And this time, it's beyond just a reflection. It almost looks like there's a city, like structures made by intelligent life, upside down and right side up. This is some really just interesting art. It's almost like he's just how H.P. Lovecraft never really describes his monsters. He leaves it up to your imagination. Nobody really knows what Cthulhu looks like. He doesn't really tell you in detail. He keeps it vague. And this art is almost, even though it's very illustrated, it's almost like you're not quite sure what you're looking at. Like, yeah, I guess there are some buildings there, but there's something weird about it where he really captures that vagueness. Even though he's showing it to you, he's drawing it out, but it almost has this layer of opaqueness where you're like, I'm not quite sure what I'm looking at. There's a lot of talking heads in here. So they continue to get geological samples. They find more of those slates with the organic, sophisticated organic life in them. And Lake is getting more and more just excited about it. The other guys are saying, okay, maybe tomorrow we'll go. We got to, rest up. We got to have caution. But Lake is kind of becoming obsessed. He's like, we don't have time. This is the find of beyond the century. It's the find of all times. It's the scientific discovery of the millennia. And so they start arguing where he's like, give me 20 men. We got to get more of this stuff. This is incredible. So he kind of wins out just by sheer will. Basically, he's like, I don't care about the dangers. This is too important a scientific discovery to hold back. So Lake, the biologist, and a bunch of men, they go like far away from the other guys into the interior. He finds a lot of these slates. He's got a bunch of them. But of course, he doesn't want to stop. Even though the weather is turning bad, they get a radio report from the other ship, and it's really becoming hazardous to be out there. And then that's when they find it, the find of the century. The Mountain of Madness, if you will. It's basically like bigger than Everest. Nobody's ever known this existed. So Lake discovered it. And he's kind of gloating. He's like, radio back those guys. They were saying I shouldn't come out here, but look at this, the vastness of this. And just so dark and foreboding, this mountain range. I would totally run. So the communications get back to the main camp, and they're like, okay, I guess we should hook up with them. This is an important discovery. They start seeing, when they fly into the mountains to survey them, one of them says, it looks like there's ramparts, like old castles. And there are these caves in the mountain, almost like Anasazi cliff dwellings. So there is almost like signs that the intelligent life was here. Once again, though, we're not really sure what we're looking at. We definitely see things that don't look exactly like a normal mountain, but you're not sure. It just looks creepy and weird. So basically Lake, everyone's telling him like, maybe we should turn back, it's dangerous, but Lake will not hear of it. He is totally obsessed at this point. He's just like, keep going further. And the guys who stayed behind, not the main camp, but Lake went off with a few guys. And then the guys in his party who stayed behind, they find this cave. Look at that weird fucking cave. That's pretty bizarre looking. And so they radio Lake, and they say, you got to get back here. This is more important than anything you're looking at now. So Lake comes back, and they start exploring the cave. Just look at this, just otherworldly weirdness going on. I don't know, I'm not a spelunker. Maybe caves are this weird. They probably are. I saw that Werner Herzog movie about caves, and it is like almost an alien landscape. So they're finding shit in there that they totally proves their theory times 100. They're finding fossils of cephalopods, corals, sponges even, vertebrate bones. But that's nothing compared to what they're going to find. They round a corner and they find this vast cavern full of skeletons, shells, and bones. Some of the bones seem to have punctured skulls, as if they are wounded by some kind of puncturing device. Some of them seems to they were cut by a sharp edge, which doesn't make any sense, because there weren't even humans, proto-humans, at this time on the geological strata. So just everything's topsy-turvy. And he finds this like starfish-looking thing. The dogs are freaking out. The dogs know this is not kosher. And then they find a totally like some kind of alien being. Or prehistoric being. Almost whole. It's not even a fossil. And that's when they come upon this chamber. These weird star-headed creatures. They don't even look like they have the physiognomy of or anything from Earth. And they're like whole. They're not fossils. Look at these weird looking things. You can definitely see where the movie Alien got its inspiration from. Look at that. So now Lake has radioed back the main camp that stayed behind, and he's like, guys, this is way beyond a bunch of slates with some weird organic material in it. You guys have got to get out here. Just repulsive looking creatures. So they're studying them and they're amphibious. They even seem to have wings that they could fly. They could live underwater, live on land, and fly. Or at least they theorized they could. He sends another gloating message back to Dyer. It says, you better kick yourself for trying to stop me from doing this expedition. This is like the most incredible scientific find ever. I mean, this is the kind of find that would change all meaning of life on Earth. It's like the theory of relativity for biology. So Lake starts vivisecting one of them, and this horrible odor arises. And it's just so nasty, all this disgusting parts of the creature. And the stench is becoming unbearable. Of course, the dogs are freaking out because they can smell it from outside this little Quonset hut they set up. Just so he draws it so oozy and gross. So he comes to the conclusion, he says, perhaps it is not our understanding of evolution on Earth that is incorrect, but that this organism did not undergo its evolution on Earth. So he's starting to figure out that, yeah, these things came from another planet when the Earth was young. And it's interesting how H.P. Lovecraft has his whole mythos is all connected, almost like the Marvel Universe or something. So they talk about how all these guys who are from Miskatonic University, Miskatonic has a copy of the Necronomicon in its library. And so a few of these guys have obviously read it. So they recognize that, wait, these are the elder gods that the Necronomicon talks about. So now we're back at the guys that stayed behind under Dyer. And the radio communication with Lake cuts off. And they can't get through to him. There's those beautifully drawn mountains again. So Professor Dyer is gonna, he's like, we got to mount a rescue expedition. This is now a rescue operation. They haven't called us in enough days that this is an emergency now. So they triangulate their last position, and they're hoping they're gonna find the guys. These 2-page spreads are just gorgeous. It kind of reminds me of Mark Nelson, the guy who drew that first Dark Horse Alien series with all of the wash tones and the gray tones, but way more detailed. I wonder what would have happened to that guy. He was pretty good. They see another one of those mirages where it looks like it's a city floating upside down. And now it's their turn to see the Mountains of Madness for the first time. And they're just as awestruck as Lake's party was. And Dyer notices that it does remind him of some of the areas mentioned in the Necronomicon. And so they find the encampment. Things are not looking good. Just complete desolation. All their machinery is trashed. They can't find anyone. And they realize as they walk through that it wasn't just some storm. Like the planes are like, it looks like they're melted at parts. There's like cans of food that were ripped open. No storm could do that, right? So obviously they're creeped out and very baffled. So they finally find the dead bodies of the crew. And look at this. It's just like they're melted together, and it's just horrifying. We see that upright corpse again. That will be found a year later. I think that is Lake. So they're going to keep looking for survivors. Not everyone's accounted for. And they find the bodies all, eviscerated and skinned. Is echoing that prologue. All the meat's been separated from the bones. Strangely enough, there's like a circle a sprinkling of salt around everything. Whoever did this found their salt and like sprinkled it around. I don't know if that's some important clue that we'll find out in volume 2. Just a curious little thing. Once again, the dogs are wigging out. They know something not natural is going on. And they find the star-shaped mound. So the only one missing from the corpses is Gedney, Lake's assistant. So Dyer and a few others decide to go, get in a plane and search for any sign of him. If there's any trail in the area around there. Sometimes I really don't know what I'm looking at. It just looks cool. It's some of the wreckage. Here's that tin can. So they know this is, they're positive that the storm couldn't have done this. Something attacked their colleagues. So they go to the mouth of the cave. And they basically realize they don't have the manpower or the machinery to properly explore it. So they kind of put all the wreckage in front of it, try to block it off. And then they go to discover the mound, the star mound. And they start digging into it. And they find those star-headed creatures, but only the ones that were injured. Because a lot of them had wounds, but some were totally whole. So they find the one that Lake dissected, but then the other ones had other wounds. So maybe they were dead anyway, but all the other ones are gone. The healthy ones, quote-unquote healthy ones. So they're like, what the fuck? So the plane comes back. They didn't find any trace of Gedney or anyone. But they're not going to give up on the search. So Dyer basically wants to pull the plug on the whole expedition. He wants to just fly back. Or maybe it's Pabodie, sorry. Pabodie, the engineer, he just wants to leave Antarctica and go back to Arkham. But Dyer's not going to let it go. Dyer's like, we still have the mountains to explore. Maybe that's where either we'll find their attackers or get Gedney. And that's where we leave off on chapter 1, or part 1. Oh, creepy. We have a bunch of ads for... Oh, I'm sorry. We have a nice little creator bios for H.P. Lovecraft and Gou Tanabe. And a lot of ads for other manga. So there you go, guys. H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountain of Madness, adapted by Gou Tanabe. I hope you guys enjoyed looking at this today. That's some really nice art. Kind of wish this was bigger. This little kind of dinky manga edition. This art needs to breathe more. It's so finely detailed. I don't know why they would publish it at this size. I know this is a popular marketing size for manga, but it could have at least been the digest size, the slightly bigger manga. This is that little tiny kind. But, yeah, maybe they'll reprint it in a nice big edition one day. Maybe they already did. I don't even know. But I would wait for that one if it does exist. But in the meantime, this is a pretty nice read, and especially if you're a fan of H.P. Lovecraft. I haven't read a lot of Lovecraft, maybe about the equivalent of 2 books worth of stuff of his. But I like it, and I like the amazing, the weird slow pacing he does in his stories. It's really creepy. So that's it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.